Hey y'all.
Hey everybody. Here we are.
We on?
We live.
We live. Alright, let me get this going. Alright. Good deal. Hey everyone.
All right.
Looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah. It feels like we just skipped a week, but it feels like a long time.
I would say a lot has happened.
Yes. It feels like a lot has just been all happening.
In the last, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot's Hey Allie, hey Alberto. A lot is changing rapidly. Um, it's pretty cool how rapidly it's changing. It's like 2020 is about to, well, it's not about to, it's the big game changer, hopefully.
Yeah.
Let's hope. Oh,
Mm-hmm.
that's sweet, thank you. All right.
Does it feel like this year is going by quickly? Like it's June
Um, not any, I don't feel any quicker.
Yeah,
No,
no.
I don't feel like any quicker in particular. I feel personally very slowed down, and I think that comes from feeling more clarity.
Mm-hmm.
I think the concept, thank you.
Yeah.
I feel like the concept of things moving quickly sometimes relates back to me not having, you want to go on the underside?
No, I want to go this way.
I feel like sometimes what if we did the other way? Okay. Me not having clarity is sometimes related back to how present or not I am.
Uh-huh.
Okay. Probably not to this. Okay, we're figuring this out, but that's fine. Not important in the scheme of things. That's not what we're here to do or talk about.
I just want you to be talking right into it.
Okay.
And it wasn't before.
How about, does that feel better?
That feels better.
Okay, cool. All right. Okay, so we're here and we're live.
And we're gonna as we get going, just wanna do you wanna kind of let everybody know your physical state right now?
Yes, so I had a minor outpatient procedure this morning. I'm all good and well, but you can imagine I've been sleeping most of the day. And yeah, I'm a little loopy. I was under anesthesia, so all's well, but a little bit loopy, and I think that's great. I find that honestly, when we're loopy or like whatever, potentially we can tune in a deeper way. We're not as inhibited. I'm probably not going to try to sound perfect, and all that's good. The other thing is that we're having the AC folks come out tomorrow, so we have no real good air conditioner right now. So
It's hot.
It's hot,
and we're tired.
which makes excellent conditions for this very important conversation.
Yeah, because it's uncomfortable, and
yeah, so we're
it's the way it is.
experiencing that in as many ways as we can manage in our own lives.
Well, I just want to say, before we kind of get started, I just want to say that, you know, part of this is actually in some ways a really exciting conversation
Oh yeah.
for us to have. And just for those folks listening, I mean, we're gonna be talking about kind of the reading aloud and racial justice and the movement that's happening across the country right now. So that's what we're going to kind of talk about from the reading aloud perspective. And I'll say that this is a conversation that I'm really excited to have, because and many of our consistent listeners and the Reading Aloud family know this, but the reason that we launched this podcast in the first place was so that we could inspire and help to cultivate greater conversation and connection out in the world. And Marisol and I really felt that, like, just by having conversations, vulnerable, real, raw conversations, as a married couple in this stage in our life, never pretending that we're experts, but knowing that we're going to talk about this and then sharing that with the world. Our whole kind of goal, if you will, or vision with that was to inspire others to have conversation.
And essentially, we're having this like, so when we think about things, right, like we first think about them in our own heads, and then pretty quickly thereafter we share them with somebody who's maybe close with us, or for example. So like you all are hearing the first time we're talking about so many things.
Yes.
Now, this is not the first time we've talked about race or justice issues or this movement in our relationship, but I did ask Adam a question yesterday or 2 days ago, and we were like, let's save it for the podcast. So we don't have these conversations until we have them here with you. So it's a demonstration of how to have the vulnerable, intimate conversations the first time, and really encourage folks to do that before they go out into the world and have them, because they're such important topics that need to be discussed in a safe space, where there's a lot of lack of judgment. Or an emphasis on lack of judgment. So, great.
Yeah, and one of the.
Do we want to be really clear about what we're talking about today? Let's be really clear.
Yeah, let's be really clear. What was the? Yeah, go for it. If you
not
feel
the
like,
question, like the overall conversation.
Great. So, I think from my perspective, we are in another time right now, in which issues of systemic, institutionalized racism have been and are being put on full display. People are rising up against that, and that is sparking a national debate, shouldn't even be a debate, but a national conversation about the role that racism plays in our society, in our institutions, and the oppression of Black people in this country, which has occurred since our founding. And so that is there's so much happening within that, actions and rallies and marches and political movement and policy proposals and, conversations. But I think what we want to focus on is just the collective act of having this vulnerable conversation, from our own perspective, right? So me personally, I am a straight white male, right? I am absolutely the most privileged class in this country today. I'm straight, I'm white, I'm from a middle class family. Society is structured to give me every advantage.
Right.
And so how do I have this conversation with my partner? Now I have my own beliefs and ideas about it, but like, how do we talk about this, and how do we start the conversation here as we, it goes out into the world?
And I am a biracial woman, but my skin color contributes to my passing as white, so I get the same advantages that for the most part that white women get.
Right.
For the most part.
And and right now it's an important time for dialogue. One of the major agents of change is dialogue, and hopefully everybody here can start to have these dialogues not only with people in their community and with their peers, but also, we believe for many people that dialogue can start with their relationship. So
I have a first request.
Yeah.
I'm going to need you to hold my hand at times, because I'm realizing, like, as we're talking, I'm like, because, I think part of this is that, so I have a newsletter that I put out weekly that I've been discussing this topic in, and I have an Instagram platform and some other ways that I show up, and aside from kind of riffing on the Instagram platform, I would say aside from that, I have had the privilege of thinking before I speak, and I don't now, and I was under anesthesia today, and I can feel thank you.
Yeah.
I can feel like my vulnerability about like, okay, I'm about 2-3 steps behind my own words. And so, this is a great opportunity for me to really F this one up.
Yeah. And I think that's real. And that's what's making this conversation real, because we haven't rehearsed this. we're coming from our true selves and we're doing it live and people are watching and it's around a really vulnerable topic, you know, where we could say something wrong. We could say something where we need to be educated more on that fact, and we're just going to lay this out there. And I think our intention is just to, you know, show you all and put on display a real conversation about this. So I think
Yeah.
we should kind of like
Launch in.
launch in
Okay.
and
Yeah.
ask each other some questions.
Great.
And appreciate y'all tuning in. If you do want to comment or offer any like feedback or suggestion or offer us up a resource, if we say something off base or you feel like could learn in that area, please put it in the chat box. We are open to feedback.
Oh,
Just say
to
that.
be clear, yeah, and this is also for anybody who's listening after the fact. So when the recording comes out this week, you know, we're at readingaloudlove@gmail.com. Please send your thoughts, your feedback. That's one of the commitments that both Adam and I have made for a long time, is that we do not want to operate from defensiveness or our fragility. So, you know, send your thoughts and feelings and we will, you know, receive them, consider them, and then take action where necessary. So
Yeah.
Thank you.
I have a question for you.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Throughout the course, since the brutal murders of Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, and kind of, you know, the initial spark of this phase of
And Ahmaud Arbery.
And
so many more.
And so many more. But like,
since
since this kind of like mark in this initial phase, what's one of the biggest takeaways that you've kind of like felt, like you personally, like what really have you kind of like grown out of it? Has there been something you've learned or been something that you've kind of opened up to?
Yeah. So, you know, I think for me, you know, I have listened to you talk about this issue so much, and then I've been doing some work in the board that I serve on, and a few kind of like here and there's, and I think for me, kind of the highlights are all of the areas where I was compartmentalizing. So where this work was at the forefront of my mind, and then where it was at in the background. And how I have, you know, that's my privilege, is to make it to be self-selecting that way. And so for me, it's like a real highlight of that dynamic in my own life, as well as, you know, like as I'm like, I haven't had, you know, it's felt like such an overwhelming topic to tackle, and I felt many times hopeless, like what can I do other than kind of what I do here or there. And I think for me, all of a sudden I gathered enough like wind, and I feel like I am so bound in with this collective movement that I have gained clarity of like, this is how I can move forward. Like I no longer feel disabled by the work that I need to do. I feel very, you know, kind of clear. I'm not saying I know everything, but like I'm getting clearer and clearer every day, and I feel so much more capacity and direction. And then I think the other thing is, you know, the 75 things white people can do. There's a hawk. Yes.
Nice.
Huge.
Good omen.
The 75 things white people can do gave me really tactical action steps, and just like both from all angles and very easy, as well as having white feelings partners. So having it was a recommendation that came through this through a friend.
How do you define that? A white feelings partner?
Yeah, well, it was a recommendation that came through a friend who posted, this woman who has, you know, not that many followers on Instagram, but she's been posting this really powerful stuff, and like legitimately non-judgmental spaces to process through not just the feelings, because I don't really want to get into like really so self-centered that so focused that I'm like constantly talking about my feelings about this, but a place where I can like say, oh my gosh, this is what I've been doing for X amount of years. I've got to change it. Hold me accountable. I feel like crap. You know, I have shame and guilt about it. And then kind of quickly get that ball, like getting the shame and guilt out on the table so that things can get moving really quickly. So it's talking with other white people about my experience and the ways in which I've shown up or not shown up and how I feel about that.
Yeah. Well,
And it's been incredible. It's been,
Yeah.
it's made my
You
capacity
really kind of
to
went on
move.
you sounds like you really went on like a range of emotions throughout almost a short period of time, and then
Yeah.
kind of came to a place of action, which is awesome.
Well, that was what I felt was urgency. And so many people, when they feel urgency, they fight, flight, or freeze. And so, I think for me initially, it was like, oh my gosh. And then it was a little collapse. I felt paralyzed
Mm-hmm.
for maybe a day. And then I was like, what do I do? What do I do? What do I do? I connected in with a group of women that are dear friends of mine, and then off to the races.
Yeah.
Like I was like, okay, I have capacity and I have women who are going to support
Y'all
me.
been tearing that Marco Polo up.
I mean, I just found it this week,
Yeah.
and I've got like
Amazing.
thousands of videos.
Wow, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Can I share my experience?
Yes, sorry for not
No, no, no,
asking.
no, no. I kind of jumped into that. I think for me, there's two things that kind of like really grounded themselves.
You're
in
not
me.
answering my question though, right? My big question that I asked you
No,
the
no,
other
no,
day.
no,
Okay.
no. No, there's two things about, so, what I just asked Mighty Soul, like, what is this? Anyway, there's two things that really grounded in it for me. One being, um, one being like, it wasn't as much like I don't do direct racial justice work, but I work in a broader kind of justice movement role, and so I talk about this stuff a lot and think about it a lot in the specific work that I do. But like,
Well, the intersection of
environmental and environmental justice,
Mhm.
and it wasn't that the actions that really got to me, but like it was a reminder for me this time the power of the stories I was hearing. And it's like it's this big experience that people of color are having that I can't personally relate to, but I can gain a deeper understanding with by hearing their stories and listening to them. And I have had always, or not always, but like since I've done racial justice trainings, and I recommend everybody do one. But since I've done those, you have a more like almost an academic understanding of kind of like the systems and the structures and redlining and all the ways that
Pipelines.
and all the prison pipelines and all those things and the role of the police, and you have this like academic understanding. But I felt like this time more than ever, I heard more personal stories on social media or just through various channels, and we were listening to something today which made me think of this, in that the speaker was talking about how um, you know learning to know oneself more is also creating deeper connection with universal experience. So deepening your connection with yourself was deepening a connection with universal experience. And it was almost like through this process, the stories that I were hearing were like deepening my personal understanding of the Black American experience. And I really gained that through stories this time. So I just so appreciated the storytelling. Um, and rather than maybe learning more about the more academic kind of sides,
Appreciated meaning just feeling more connected into
the experience of being Black in America.
So from the head to the heart. Okay, I
Yeah.
just stuck my finger in my mouth.
Yeah, she's still got a little anesthesia. Yeah, that's a great way of putting it. From the head to the heart. I feel like it moved into more of a heart space for me in this time, and that was being like growing up, being very influenced by patriarchal systems and white supremacy, and where you're thinking efficiency and you're thinking like understanding and academia, and this like moving that into the heart space, the more kind of like deepening my cultural appreciation and understanding for like racism in America was such a wonderful complement to my journey in understanding this work and becoming a anti-racist ally in this movement.
Well, it kind of reminds me of like, first of all, the head is like we give so much emphasis to it here in the West, but it's so limited. Um, and also biased, of course, but like to whatever your own contextual experience is, but like you're creating a whole body experience. So yeah, you're creating this like entire body experience, which is really incredible. So somebody just replied, Allie replied, like it's almost freeing. Interesting. Say more about that, Allie, and we'll get to it. Please say more about how you feel more free. So my question to you the other day was, so like this is not about touting what you've done or whatever, but I do know and have listened for many years as you've talked about the intersection of in the environmental movement and race. And so I have learned so much from you. I feel very privileged to be able to like that you have done so much work because I am the benefactor of that in many ways. I also feel very lucky that you don't judge me. I just want to say thank you for that. And I love you too. Don't make me cry on this podcast. I cry every time. And this time with the anesthesia, don't touch my hand because you're gonna make me cry.
Okay.
Anyways, so as I've learned, I'm like, wow, you take action every day in your work life. I also know that we take some action in our personal and our spiritual lives. Now, never enough, right? Like for sure for me, never enough. I'll just speak for myself. Never enough. I've never taken enough action, but my question to you was like, what are you going to do now? What's the next level for you look like? How, like, where are you called to be in this? And how, like, how else, what else are you going to do? I don't know how else to ask that.
Yeah, no, I mean, I appreciate that question. And like, I think that continuing to ask that question is a really important thing, right? Like, what's next? What's next? How are we're never getting to the top of this mountain of like, equality. It's like we climb up and you think you're getting top, but it's a plateau and you climb up again. And I just love that analogy. And it's like, it's not about, like it is about achieving like that vision of the world, but it is also just as much about the journey of getting there. So, asking yourself continuously, how do I continue to grow? How do I deepen and what's next? And when you asked me that and we cut off the conversation because we wanted to kind of dive into it more here, it was really just thinking about like how we've talked, there's a lot of emphasis and it should be on outward action. And everybody there listening, we hope that you're donating and
time, money,
talent,
everything.
Yep, all of that needs to be out there.
And if you don't know what resources, if you need resources for that, don't hesitate to ask.
Yeah, feel free to reach out to us on Facebook, and we're happy to provide some. At the same time, when you asked that question, it kind of like hit me and made me think about like, how am I personally, as an individual, growing with this? Not necessarily what I know and understand, what's my knowledge level, or what am I doing with my hands and my feet and my mouth, but how am I growing internally? And how is this awakening, if you will, impacting me as a human, my soul? And how am I integrating it into my personal growth and work and my mental state? And I actually appreciate that we had a comment. It's almost freeing because I think a lot of these ways and these isms and these systems that have kind of like been constructed around this, they trap our souls in a lot of ways.
They actually impact us all. Now, not the same. They don't impact us all in the same way, but they impact us all. And can I interject real quick? That this group, my White Feelings group that I'm with, my White Feelings partners, one of the things that we talk about, because we're all therapists, so we talk about like ways in which we have or haven't approached racism with our white clients. So is that a topic of conversation? And then of course we all are now. And so, one of the women was like, she came at it from, so one of her clients had some empathy for, was it Sarah Cooper, Amy Cooper or whatever, the woman in the Amy Cooper, I think she felt empathy for this woman who was in New York, who was very scared. And so this therapist was talking to her about, yeah, you are relating back to the fear that woman felt, and that fear that comes from so many years of training, like really being taught to fear the black man. And then she was like, it's interesting how white supremacy affects us all.
Yeah.
Right. Now, again, not the same way
at
all, but
differently.
But it negatively affects us all. And I think people think a lot about the privilege that they have as white people and like, oh, I get the benefits, but like, it's not good for any of us.
Well, what you remind me too, if anybody has a chance, if any men out there reading, and want to learn more about like feminism and the patriarchy, I am just finishing up Bell Hooks' How to Love book.
Will to Change.
Oh, Will to Change. The Will to Change. And this is one thing that Bell Hooks talks about in the book, is what it actually focuses on is the way that patriarchal systems harm men. They harm the, for lack of a better,
say more, because people will get pissed when they hear that.
That patriarchal systems harm men. Yeah. I mean, in the same way that our society is limited and oppressed because of the lack of equality, right? Because we are not embracing the full spectrum of diversity of cultures and ideas, and applying that, something with a full, a full spectrum of diversity is so much stronger and better. Okay, real quick.
And how terrible to be fed ways to abuse power.
Exactly.
And to be fed and taught violence and hate. How terrible it is to be fed that as a young man.
Yeah, and that's who we're supposed to be, and it just shows that, in terms of, and there's all these statistics, and I'm doing a horrible job regurgitating it here, but like, of suicide rates in men, and the ways in which
suicide rates in white men, but this
in white men,
like around the age of 50, this midlife crisis-y type time, are some of the highest in our nation, if not, no, they're the highest.
And so it's just like, and I don't want to get off of like racial justice and talk about like white men and patriarchy, like, but it's something that I've like felt a lot in this time of the emotional impact on me as an individual, recognizing that that as best I can do, providing empathy for the, in my opinion, at least at this point, much more severe impact on communities of color, and with my other, with my brothers out there, black men who are being murdered by the police, like that psychological is much more intense than mine, but like just looking into the impact that it's having on me, so that, as I said before, I can show up as the best anti-racist ally that I possibly can in this. And I think in a lot of ways it has made me, like, just one way that institutionalized racism in America has impacted me as an individual, is that it has made me so much more attuned to like deadlines and time, and that has raised my stress, and it has made me a much more kind of like impatient person. So like, I am impatient because of institutionalized racism.
Right, and so what you're talking about is that institutionalized racism, white supremacist culture feeds into productivity, progress, efficiency, chronos time, all of these kinds of perfectionism. I think that's an experience I've had as a white woman, is perfectionism. in all aspects of my life and things like that. So did you feel like you finished what you had said about
Yeah.
the things that you are doing?
Yeah, and
yet, or
I'd
not?
just like to say really quickly, I don't think I know them all yet. Like that last
Sure,
statement where
yeah.
I stumbled through it, like I don't think I know them all yet, but I'm like I'm just excited about looking more into that in my own personal work while I continue to, walk and work and donate and do all the things that I can outwardly. I'm really wanting to deepen into this personal level.
Why is it that we're just like, why is it as a nation we're just now doing it? Like I kind of spoke to this before as like how I feel like there's some solidarity. Like I finally have direction that I haven't sought out before or haven't been able to find or whatever I want to, whatever kind of excuse I want to make or feeling about that. And then I feel like, okay, I'm with this wind. Like now it is happening now differently than it has happened. Maybe
I hope
since
so.
but something has happened this week that is undeniable.
Yeah.
So it's like,
It does
why?
feel like one of those. It does feel like that moment. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm gonna participate. Everybody's saying they're gonna participate in keeping it going and
Mhm.
making the changes that need to be made. And oh my gosh, I so hope that. But why now? Like, what is it? I mean, the astrologers are saying it's 2020 and all these planets, which is very whitewashed. I understand. And then other people are saying it's like this, that, and the other. But we've got these pandemics happening: the pandemic of race and the pandemic of coronavirus, and it's just,
I think that's a great question. I don't know the answer, and I don't think that
why didn't we do more until now? And
I
are we doing more now?
yeah, I mean, that's a lot. I guess here's what came to my mind. I would say that I feel like what I would attribute this moment to is it's I always see this as a process and a building, right? Like in my opinion, this is the reason that there feels like such a moment of change right now, in my opinion, is because of the tireless work of Black leaders and Black-led organizations for decades, and especially the hyper-focused work of Black leaders and Black-led organizations since Trayvon, you know, and probably since others. I don't want to discount anybody, but like in my mind, like since some of the more high profile killings in kind of the age of cell phone recording, which I think plays into it a lot. But and the work that those leaders and organizations have done to sow the seeds of movements and to sow the seeds of revolution in our society, when something like the, George Floyd's murder goes quote unquote viral, that is water for those seeds that have already been planted. And it isn't necessary, like it's just the combination of that flower bursting out of the ground, just like you see those stop motion things, like where does it come from? But there's
Energy. It's like the energy.
The energy is there, and nobody can say now on that energy. Nobody can say if they could, they would have done it 100 years ago, right? But you're just continuing to sow those seeds. You're continuing to cultivate the soil, just to use the like gardening analogy here. But like, and so I just attribute the reason that we're as a country talking about this and everybody's on fire. It is because of the work of so many organizers working on the front lines and Black leaders in this country.
I think my question is also just for us, like, what am I going to see different in you? What am I going to recognize? How will I recognize your change?
Well, it's a great question. I think one of the things that I've been reflecting on as like another step that I can take is looking for ways to like give power away in the way that empowers, not empowers, but like give my power and privilege away as a white man and in that learn a new way. Like I've said to you over and over, and I'm still kind of discovering this. And those watching this is like raw. I don't really know where this is going, but like now is not my time. Now's not my time. As a straight white man, now's not my time. And I don't mean that in a way of like I'm just gonna crawl into a hole because you know not that, but like now's not my time in the sense of like now's not my time to you know be out in front or voice up in the kind of like authoritative way or decision making way. Even if I have some sort of experience, it's like I don't know, I'm just searching for a way to cede power, or what's
Succeed.
Succeed power, thank you, to succeed power, in a way that almost gives me a new sense of power, like gives I gain more heart-centered power, right, instead of systematic power. I gain more heart-centered power by succeeding power out in the world to you know do what I can to grow this movement in a way. Like, and I'm figuring out the ways. It's not like I'm the CEO of a major corporation and can do that and like give up my position to a person of color, but there are subtle ways. There are ways in which I can step back instead of step up in conversations when I'm so trained as a white man to step up constantly and offer my opinion. That's a way that I can just step back and let others do that. There are ways in which I can just, yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. I find that you do that to begin with, or you have learned to do that in the last few years, especially around like patriarchal culture too, which of course is in many ways, has a lot of,
Intertwined.
yeah, oh yeah. And so it's interesting because I want you to continue to be a bridge for other white men who are on this journey as well, to share knowledge, resources, information with them. Seems like if you can redirect almost all of your energy in that direction and then really go forward. So it's instead of, and it's with humility that you do that, but instead of quieting down or getting really, I mean, you need to listen in from our BIPOC brothers and sisters. Then you need to take what you know to this community, but just that community.
Yeah.
And that feels,
educating my peers of other white men.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I feel like for me, the ways that you'll see me be different, are not trying to cut corners as much. I think you'll see what I know grow, like because I'll be learning and listening. You'll see me more um, apt or willing to participate in dialogue, events, things like that. And I think you'll see a really big change in my business, which I'm very much trying to figure out what that looks like.
Yeah. Thank you for those things.
Mm-hmm. So I just want to see if
Yeah,
there's any
we've had
comments
a
here
couple,
that we
yeah.
can just kind of. So this is about the free. It's almost freeing. There's something about acknowledging other people's experience and that your experience is influenced within the patriarchy and the white supremacy in our system that opens your heart and mind to say, I'm not perfect, I'm flawed, and I'm free to acknowledge that and try and fail to fix this and fight and say the wrong thing while doing that. And with that freedom, I can apologize when I do it wrong and try again without feeling crippled by shame or my point of views. So as we basically deconstruct white supremacy in ourselves, we are then free to make mistakes, be flawed, be humbled by what we don't know. And that's vulnerability, and vulnerability is freedom.
That's beautiful.
And trying to hide it by finding reasons that I'm not racist, such as it's about the family unit, all lives matter, focusing on the wrong thing, that can make you feel caged. So again, the ways in which we also do not benefit from white supremacy.
Yeah.
Was another comment, because the new generation is showing up and all types of people of all races and all walks of life are showing up against injustice. The virus brought out a lot of inequity. So that was in response to why now. So there's just these like incredible highlighters, and I think cell phones are one, coronavirus is another, but there's these magnifiers on, and I think that, you know, the internet, we've talked about this before in other podcasts, but it really does say, like, we can take the temperature of the whole world at this point, most countries that participate in the internet, and, you know, take the temperature of the world and kind of bind together and say, oh, we're all in agree, or, you know, there's enough of us in agreement that we can do something.
Yeah.
So what can I do? Follow the teachings and welcoming all of my diversity of creation, love my neighbor as myself, do not judge. And with each
Well, I
other.
appreciate, you know, I just appreciate the, you
And
know,
a lot of idle minds looking for purpose right now. That's a good one.
yeah, and you know, I appreciate the spiritual aspects of, you know, being able to you know, welcome the diversity of creation, and at the same time, like, you know, I think it's important to stay away and remove ourselves from the "we are all one" language, especially when we're talking about, you know, racial justice, because in that context, we're not all one. You know,
We haven't had the all one.
we haven't had that. We're not having a collective, like, experience of reality in that sense. You know, and so, but learning how to weave in divinity and spiritual principles into this very real, raw work that's, you know, based in a lot of pain and also a lot of, like, joy and the potential for, you know, like, creating those. I just think that's a beautiful mixture as well.
Mm-hmm. Anything else you want to say on that? It's an important one. It's kind of this distinction between the all lives matter and the Black Lives Matter, and why we are focusing on Black lives right now. For anybody who's not clear about that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess for anybody that's not clear about that, it's that, you know,
Or how all one.
in our Black communities, you know, the house is on fire, and it's on, you know, it's been on fire for generations, and you know, since the transatlantic slave trade, in terms of the West, and you know, it is long past that we focus on healing those wounds and repairing that and paying attention through all the varieties from our daily lives to education to political action. So, you know, that's why we're focused on Black lives. You know, and I think that, like, there's probably a section of, like, all lives matter folks that are just, you know, coming from, you know, they're just a lack of understanding and you know, racist ideology that they're putting out there. I think there's also a section that are kind of seeing it in this more, like, spiritual sense, in terms of, like, we're all in this collective experience, and, like, we're all human, we're all one man, and, you know, from a super high level, ultra spiritual, like, we're all made of stardust, you know, maybe from that perspective, but that is not the reality of our world and our day-to-day lives. And just as, like, we are so focused on healing the injustices and the inequities in our daily lives and these systems that we exist within, that is not true. We are not all one in that. There are classes, and there are biases, and there are racist structures that are in place.
Until people stop dying disproportionately, then we're not living in a heaven on earth.
Exactly.
So one last question that I want to get to. So with each other, we're open, but how do starting these conversations with your close family units been? How do you navigate not burning familial bridges? So I'll just speak from my experience that, you know, right after all this happened, the first thing I did was call my parents just to kind of take the temperature. So, like, is this going to be topic of conversation for them? Are they going to bring it up? Am I going to bring it up? Who's going to start talking about it first? And then it's actually been sort of a little bit of a slow burn, and I say slow burn like a week long, but eventually it's like getting direct and to the point. But it's interesting to pay attention to, like, I've been using this bus stop metaphor. It's like figuring out what bus stop people are at. So if you're at bus stop number 1, you've never even considered that you might have privilege as a white person. If you're at bus stop number 3, you've acknowledged your privilege, you've done some research, but you're not really sure where to take action. Bus stop number 6, blah, 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 you get it. So, kind of figuring out what bus stop people are at and really starting, you've taught me so much about this, Adam, but really starting from where they're at, being willing to listen, acknowledge where they're, kind of paying attention to where the because there's a right and wrong here. That's not always true with every opinion, but like where the right feelings are, and really highlighting, wow, that's awesome, and kind of capitalizing on that and kind of pushing people in the direction that they're already headed when they're headed in the right direction.
Yeah.
And a shit ton of bravery.
Yeah, I love that so much. The way, this is very similar to what you're saying. Like, to answer that question from my perspective, it's like you, especially with those that you have an opportunity to engage for an extended period of time with. It's a different situation if you're like calling out some racist comment on social media, and there's not. But if you're actually engaging in a conversation, listening is such an important part. Even if that person is kind of, crazy and just uneducated about these issues and really has some, backwards beliefs around this. But like listening, and then as Marisol was saying, finding out where they're at. And moving those steps along the way. I used to teach people how to like raise money on the street, and you ever say somebody wave, and like the first time somebody does that, you kind of practice in the office, and the first time they do that, they make every single mistake. There's probably like 15 mistakes that they make. And what you do is you don't just all of a sudden start listing off all the things that they did wrong, because then they shut down, they're overwhelmed, and they're not listening anymore. The first thing you say, and you wouldn't necessarily say this in a conversation about racial justice, but in this situation you say, great job, here's one thing that you can do different. Here's one piece of feedback. And so I would say in these conversations that are difficult with your family, you listen, you'll probably hear, if they're uneducated, 30 things that they say wrong, and you could go through litany of things, these books that you've read, and you're bursting with all this information.
And
take a breath.
To be clear, understandably so, because there's a big sense of urgency. We are way behind, so I can understand how folks would want to like educate as quickly as possible.
Right, but sometimes it's so like it is about this moment, and it is also about the long-term power building movement, and sometimes it's so urgent you have to slow down, because if you try to do it all at once, it's not going to work. And this is especially true in conversations, that it's so urgent you have to slow down. Mm-hmm. Cheers to my colleague Emily Zucchino, who's really taught me that. And and that's just, that's like slow down and work with that person if you really care about them and you really care about that, and just take the time, because it is about that long term. If you're really committed to change that person's mind, take them bus stop to bus stop.
And I think that for me, I have made probably the biggest mistake I've made in trying to be a bridge is making an assumption that people were at a different bus stop. And I recognize that I really did that early on. I just assumed that people had at least as much knowledge as me, because I didn't feel like I even had that much knowledge to begin with. And so I made this assumption, and I lost people along the way. Like it just cut off the conversation completely. Yep. And even in my best efforts to be understanding, empathetic, and encouraging. And so, the other thing, and like not assuming people have information, a lot of people don't know about the prison pipeline. So that and I'll probably get this wrong, but like that prisons are located in Black communities, right? Directly associated with it's almost like it's the school to prison pipeline. And if you can say anything more about that, but a lot of people don't understand kind of how these institutions have been almost, like fixed, not almost, have they been fixed and rigged in the direction to kind of deal with things, before they are like almost to manifest things into reality for communities.
Yeah.
And people don't know that. And the movie 13th talks all about that. The documentary 13th talks all about that. So it's like, but people don't have that understanding or understand that, I was just talking with somebody today about the fact that the police system was initially built to police slaves. Like that's where it started. So that's the history. That's the starting point of what we have now is the police system.
All the things.
All the things.
All the things.
So we appreciate you all. The brilliant documentary, I'm assuming.
The 13th,
So thank you all for your time. If you have any last thoughts or questions, we'll just give a moment for that. And just thank you all for being with us today. And
thanks for that conversation. Thanks for, I hope that you and I can continue to have those. I really appreciated that. And I feel like just between us, I now, because we had that conversation, have an ability to dive further into my thoughts and feelings around this topic with you. Like I have a desire to talk more with you about this. So let's continue. Keep the conversation going. All right.
It's our tour behind our house, in our house. Okay, y'all. Blessings.
Bye.